In response to Keir Starmer's recent rhetoric, James Campbell on Twitter said, "If you want to live in the UK, you should speak English. That's common sense," says the imperialists who colonised countries the world over, including mine, Scotland. Right, this lad needs a history lesson, and I'm the man to give him it, especially as I hail from the northeast, and it's a wonderful tradition. Just like in one of my favourite childhood comics, The Jocks and the Geordies, for people that hail from my part of the world to mercilessly rip the piss out of people that hail from his. So before we get started with the actual history that this lunatic doesn't know, I'll simply point out for all of my Scottish listeners, obviously this is just banter, it's fine. I'm not a collectivist, so obviously I'm not talking about all Scotsmen. And in the spirit of being a good neighbour, I'll start with a compliment. We all know the Scottish are a well-rounded and wonderfully inventive people, alright? Well-rounded because they've got chips on both shoulders, and inventive because they're always coming up with amazing new ways to maximise the amount of hard drugs and alcohol in the bloodstreams. Okay, James is an idiot. You know, you'd have to dig too deeply to get into that one. And he definitely gets his history lessons from the BBC, right? Horrible histories. Braveheart was a documentary. King Edward I was like evil, but in a sort of gay way. because Mel Gibson loves gay people, yeah. That's why King Edward I, he was evil, but he was like a little bit camp while he was doing his murdering. Yeah, so we all know that's a fantastic true story. And William Wallace was definitely a buff, handsome, sun-tanned love god with immaculate straight teeth, and he wasn't a little fat, pot-bellied dwarf. And, well, for some reason, these people haven't read Rabbie Burns, who famously said the line, "Bought and sold for English gold." It seems like, embarrassingly, James Campbell knows less about his own country than the average plastic paddy in Boston knows about the conflict in Northern Ireland, which I'm sure everybody watching this video is well aware. The genesis of that was hundreds of years ago. The date for the plantation of Ulster is often given as 1607 to 1609 at its height, but it was even earlier than that. The genesis of that conflict was spawned literally almost like half a millennia ago. But your average Bostonian seems to think that England invaded and wrested power from them at the point of the bayonet in about 1940. It just didn't happen. But here's the short version for Mr. Campbell, alright? Hasn't read Rabbie Burns, doesn't know the first thing about Scottish history. I bet you I've got more ooh woolly books than this thick twat. Anyway, I'll do him a solid. This'll take 2 minutes. The Darian Scheme was an unsuccessful attempt, backed largely by investors of the Kingdom of Scotland, to gain wealth and influence by establishing New Caledonia in the late 1690s. Okay, this is the real reason why England and Scotland joined in a union. Nobody got knifed. We didn't lose to them in a football match and then send 50,000 gibbering Geordies up from Newcastle in an act of vengeance and spite. No, they sunk all the money into this cockamamie scheme because they're greedy. Penny-pinching Scrooge McDuck, tight-fisted frisps. That's what happened. They went, everybody died, they lost all the money. Oh, and if nobody knows the naval acronym FRISP, it is, of course, fucking repulsive, ignorant Scottish prick. Unless you're from Glasgow, at which point it's friendly, reliable, intelligent Scottish person. So, after the Darian Scheme failed and everybody died due to the colonists' penchant for buckfast wine and heroin, they had no money. And this is where Rabbie Burns' famous line comes in. England and Scotland had, of course, shared a monarch since the personal union of the crowns in 1603, when James VI of Scotland, yes, you heard that right, of Scotland, inherited the English throne from his cousin Elizabeth I. Yes, that's the ginger one who gave that smashing speech. To become, obviously, James I of England. And you don't see us pissing and whinging about it, do you? A Scotsman took the crown in England and we went, ah well, back to work. No armies required, you chippy, brain-dead smack rat. And the actual perspectives of each nation is easily explained in a couple of paragraphs on Wikipedia. The English were happy with it. because it ensured that the monarch of England would still be a Protestant and a member of the House of Hanover. And we didn't want the left-footers in charge. And the Scots, as we previously talked about, were skint. Not just because of the Darian Scheme, but also privateers. Again, it wasn't English ships that were robbing them. The Royal Navy was simply more focused on protecting English ships than Scottish ones, but they still did it. And then sweet Queen Anne was Queen of England, Scotland and Ireland from the 8th of March 1702 and merged the kingdoms of Scotland and England until her death in 1714. And that's it. Boring. Boring. It'd be much cooler if even half of the total bollocks that the chippy, SNP-addled, pathologically indoctrinated, hateful jocks thought it was. It'd be much more interesting if there was loads of wars and scraps. But there wasn't. It was a positively dull affair, wasn't it? Politics. Mr. Campbell doesn't know this, however, does he? Remember Campbell's meatballs? Well, that bloke's obviously got a head full of them. Oh yeah, and his surname was Campbell, wasn't it? So he probably doesn't know about this little bit of history either. The massacre of Glencoe took place in Glencoe in the Argyll region of the Scottish Highlands on the 13th of February 1692. Oh yeah, remember that? Yeah, it's basically Game of Thrones type shit, where they were hosted, the Campbells were hosted and fed and watered for weeks by the McDonald's, and then they butchered all of them, including all the women and the kids. So there's a history lesson. I'll have to put a link in the description. Maybe you can read about it, educate himself. So there you go. There's a brief Bootneck history lesson for someone who is no doubt a practicing communist. Which is obviously why the SNP, people who you wouldn't trust to walk your dog round the block without somehow, I don't know, feeding it into a wood chipper or dropping it under a steamroller. People that you wouldn't trust to run a piss up in a brewery somehow led our northern neighbours for 15 years, completely unmolested, and a party that claims to be Scottish patriots put a Pakistani in charge of Scotland. You couldn't make this stuff up. They invent a fictional history and they live in a fictional present. But that's all I've got to say about it. If you think Mr. Campbell was right and Scotland was brought to heel by 10,000 bad-tempered Mackhams, barnstorming across the Highlands, fueled with Greggs and Newcastle brown ale, please let me know in the comments. I love talking to imbeciles. I'm not uploading an edited video tomorrow because I'm away for the weekend. However, I am going to do a stream tomorrow instead of Saturday at 7 PM in the UK. And my old pal, the Despot of Antrim, may be sticking his head in for a bit of crack, so that'll be good. If you haven't checked out my new store, do so. There's loads of good stuff in here. You could get your missus a nice Alan snack bar t-shirt in hot pink, or let the policeman in your life know that you are a proud supporter of community policing. Yes, the glory days. This was back when Thatcher's puppets had to give this arsonistic little miscreant 4 years jail and a good kicking in the back of the meat wagon. So check it out if you want, and I'll see you all for a live stream tomorrow. All right, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for liking and sharing as you always do, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Okay, toodle pip. Cheers.